Hey everybody, it's Annalisa here with ABC for Dance. We're going into lesson 2 for the Functional Anatomy for Dancers series, and this is about pointing and flexing. And I want you to kind of challenge some of the things you may have heard in dance class, because very often we hear people say point your toes or point your foot or point your ankle, and we're thinking, is this all the same thing or not? So when somebody says to point your toes, they're really talking about just the very edge, as you learned yesterday in your last lesson with Deborah, where the toes are this part of your foot. So if you're pointing your toes, you're going to wind up with kind of a claw at the end of your foot, and that's not what we're looking for. But when you're younger, like if you started dance when you were little, saying to point your toes made a lot of sense then. As we get older in dance, we need to think of it being more integrated. So when we point, we have to think of our foot and ankle being all connected and pointing in one piece, because there's a series of joints that have to work together for our foot to point or our ankle to point and flex. When we go to point, it's technically called plantar flexion, because this bottom surface of your foot is the plantar surface, and when we point, it shortens or flexes. When we flex our foot, it's called dorsiflexion, because this top part of your foot is called the dorsal side, and as we flex our foot, that side shortens, so that's dorsiflexion. So the fancy name for pointing is plantar flexion, the fancy name for flexing is dorsiflexion. Poor Fred, my assistant for this class, has a lot of little pins holding his feet and ankles together. So Fred doesn't have a lot of point and flexibility. So I'm not going to be able to use him for that. I'm going to use my leg instead. And you might be in the same situation I am right now, where we're in a shelter-at-home situation. I don't have anyone else here with me to tell me where I am, and I actually don't even have a mirror that I could look at to see for myself where my ankle is. So if you're in a similar situation, what I'm going to suggest is if you have a phone or any kind of device where you can take a couple of pictures of your foot in different positions, to use that if you don't have a mirror available. If you have a mirror available, great. You can look at yourself sideways in the mirror and see exactly what we're doing. But I'm going to stand up and show it to you from the camera and give you different ideas of where these positions of neutral, plantar flexed, dorsiflexed for our ankle are when we're standing up. Because when we're standing up, it's really important to know where our weight is placed and what that ankle alignment is, so that we have the proper alignment for the ankle, the proper amount of force going through, and it actually makes things a lot easier to stack if the bottom of our stack is in a good place. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, if you were wearing long pants like I am, you want to roll them up, at least so you can see your ankle. And I'm standing right now in pretty much what I would consider my default stance. This is where I go to when I'm not thinking about it. If you look at the angle of my foot on the floor to my leg going up, I am a little bit what we would call plantar flexed, because my weight is backwards. You don't see a nice clean 90-degree angle. As I move my other leg back, this is going more into plantar flexion. So if you look at where my foot and my shin meet, you see that angle gets larger. That's going into plantar flexion. Now as I start to shift my weight, here's a pretty neutral position. I feel the weight on my big toe, my little toe, my heel, and I have about a 90-degree angle at my ankle. If I continue to come forward with my weight, I am going into dorsiflexion, because I'm shutting that angle down or closing it down. So this is like if we were to go into a plie. As I go into a plie, I definitely need to be able to dorsiflex more. If your ankle doesn't dorsiflex there, you're going to get stuck. So again, if my weight is back off my heel, and you may have heard teachers tell you, careful your back weighting, or you're sliding your weight back off your heel, you're going into plantar flexion at your ankle. If your weight is pretty much going straight up and down, and you have about a 90-degree angle at your ankle, that's neutral. And then if that angle closes and you are going forward and have a shorter angle, That's dorsiflexion. So those are the three main positions of our ankle when we're weight bearing or if I'm sitting down. What we're going to do is we're going to sit on the floor. If you need to sit up on a folded towel or something for your back to be more comfortable, that's fine. If your back and the hips are really tight right now from doing a lot of sitting, bend one leg in so you're kind of in a passe with one leg or a retiré with one leg and the other leg is straight, just because it'll allow you to sit up a little bit straighter. Your arms are just relaxed, and we want to pay attention to what's going on with our foot and our ankle and the difference between pointing our foot, ankle, and our toes. So I'm going to start with my foot just nice and neutral, and then what I want to do is I want to point through my ankle, but I'm not worried about my toes. I am literally trying to stretch or extend that part of my leg. So there's my pointing of my ankle, and then I'm going to add pointing my toes afterwards. Now going into dorsiflexion, I'm going to leave my ankle pointed, but I'm going to start to dorsiflex my toes, and then I'm going to dorsiflex my ankle, or flex. So I'm going to point, point, flex, flex. Point the ankle, point the toes. Flex the toes, flex the ankle. Point the ankle, point the toes. Flex the toes, flex the ankle. Point, point, flex, flex. Practice that with both legs. You want to make sure as you're pointing and flexing that your leg is moving in a fairly straight pathway and that you don't have a lot of wiggles going around. If you do find that you're wiggling around, try to think if it feels tight or if there's pain or why you're doing that little bit of a wiggle, and see if you can concentrate your way through a straight movement. Your next lesson is going to be with Deb, and she needs you to bring a tennis ball or a little round pinky ball or a dog chew ball, but some small, kind of soft, but still firm ball with you to your next anatomy lesson.